Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by. Today we're going to look at a different kind of handle for the mill.
I think everyone with one of these Chinese mills is familiar with this style quill arrangement. I think this is probably on every small hobby machine like this I've ever seen. You've got your normal kind of drill press style quill operation. Then you tighten this locking knob here, engages with the cone clutch, and you've got fine feed off of the worm in this little piece of casting there. This is fine. Truth be told, there's nothing wrong with it. However, I happen to have something laying around the shop that I've been looking for something to do with it for ages. Yeah, how about that? Today what we're going to talk about is this adapter. I don't know that there's anyone out there that has the crank wheel off of a giant industrial gate valve laying around their shop. Maybe you do. But in general, this is just kind of talking about what if you wanted to adapt anything to this instead of the factory handle and you wanted to retain the fine adjust feature. Let's break it down, let's see how it works, and maybe that'll help someone else who wants to build something similar. Alright, so first looking at the original part, what do we have to do here? Well, first things first, we've got to put a bore in the center of it. It's got to be a nice sliding running fit on the shaft. It's got an internal blind keyway, yikes. Then it has a male taper on the outside, it's about 15 degrees, something like that. And then it has a flat feature inside of here. It's not a through hole with this shaft diameter, in other words, because there's a spring in there for preload, which has to push against that stopped feature. So here's what I did. First off, to hold the actual wheel to the whole assembly, I've just got this washer thing. It's got two counterbore 440 screws. The wheel itself has this, I don't really know exactly how this is made. My guess is that it's cast and just left rough because the dimensions here and here are completely different on the opposite side. So I don't even think this gets a secondary machining process. I think it's just as is cast. Then there's a part that looks like this. It's basically just a square flange. It's got mounting holes here for the piece that actually ties the handle to it. Then it has 4 countersunk screws in a hole pattern just to attach it to the main body. The main body of the part has a little bit of a decorative grooving here. This isn't functional, I like the way it looks. Then it's got that same taper. Then on the inside here, you've got a bore that's a nice running fit on the shaft. Then there's a blind internal keyway. Talk about how that was cut in a second. And then the bore goes all the way through. What gives the registration, a little bit of dicom there. What gives the registration surface for the preload spring is this piece only having a diameter hole that's going to allow the threaded rod to go through. Again, the preload spring kind of lives in this area. There's a counter bore in the shaft itself that kind of gives this something to sit on. So let's put it together, take it over to the machine, and see how it works. This is the tool that cut the internal blind keyway. It's basically my attempt at a quill brooch. It's got side relief, it's got a ton of bottom relief. This section here is basically rectangular to give clearance. It's ground out of just a piece of high-speed steel round that I had laying around. This mill has a very low gear. It's something like 80 RPM. And I found with the soft aluminum, putting it in low gear and manually turning the spindle using a spanner on the collet itself was actually sufficient to keep it from rotating one way or the other and throwing the keyway off. And I just tightened her up, cut most of the material right off the bat with a milling cutter, and then came in to finish it off with this. Rotated it 90 degrees to chew at the corners of the keyway. It's not really the right way to do keyway broaching. The bulk of the material really doesn't need to be removed with a good milling machine broach like this with a milling cutter, but this is a pretty deep keyway for this cutter. It's only relieved flat to about here, and it really wanted to bow away from the cut. So I had to take it slow, use a lot of cutting fluid, WD-40 on aluminum, and take my time with it. But it worked. It's a good example of not really having the right tool, but trying something you saw on YouTube and it working. So it would be better in the future to build a couple of these. What I'll probably do is just kerf a piece of drill rod, brazen some carbide, and then sharpen it on the surface grunt. I'm not going to do any of that. I don't have those things. I'm not Stephen Gottswinner over here. I might make something out of, just some drill rod and harden it, but that's about the fanciest that we can hope for in this shop. Alright, so this is the original arrangement. The only thing that's a little bit different here, with the factory knob, it's this threaded stud on a 7-lobe handle. I've got a little bit of threaded rod in here. This particular thread is M10 by 1.5 pitch. The first thing to go on are actually some spacers. This whole handle assembly is a lot more massive than what came with it from the factory, so a little bit of extra preload kind of helps with the action of it engaging and disengaging smoothly. And an easy way to do that was just to tweak how far the spring compresses with some little spacers. So we've got a couple spacers in there. Then the handle itself just kind of wiggles into place. I will do some kind of easy to grip handle knob of some sort on the end here. Not really sure what direction I want to go with that, so still waiting, just doing a nut for the time being, but it works just fine. So we'll pull this all the way in, just get a little bit of pressure on it. We've got fine feed, no problem. And then just the smallest amount of backing off on the nut. Fine feeding, fine feeding, fine feeding. There we go. And we're back to normal operation. The mass of this wheel just feels great. It allows you to really put pressure on. I actually used this with another adapter I made that didn't have the fine feed feature when I was using the broach to cut the blind keyway, and you really just get a great feeling on it. The handle is really wimpy in comparison that came with it, and plus, it's just cool. Is it ridiculous and oversized for this machine? Probably, but it's my mill, it's a lot of fun. This whole thing was inspired by Tom Lipton's video where he adapted the same kind of ship's wheel to his mill's quill, kind of a jig bore style thing. And this design is really flexible. I'm not going to do drawings because I'm not really sure if this machine is going to match any of the others that are out there, but the fact that this flange is a separate piece means that it's as easy as can be to add anything on here. You could do a spline if you had a splined wheel. You could do square like this. You could do hex. Really, just about anything. Even just a round flange coming out that has a keyway in it. If you had a hole with a key, it's a really simple way to adapt any kind of round wheel or handle to this. You can even just do a really large knob if you wanted really fine kind of manual control of it. At any rate, if you watched to the end, I'm surprised. Thank you, and I hope this helps someone who's maybe thinking about doing something similar. I like the blue on the red too.